welcome to How To Tuesday today. Get a lot of questions on Instagram, and one of the questions that I actually asked the audience recently was, would you like to see or hear a podcast on how to get started fly fishing? I know that we have a lot of fly fishermen that listen to this podcast. Um, I enjoy fly fishing. That's how I started my career. But there's others that haven't experienced it and don't really know where to start, maybe a little intimidated by the whole process. The equipment can be extremely expensive. What if you buy the wrong thing? What if you don't like it? All these different questions that might make it a little bit intimidating. Plus, a lot of people that fly fish have this tendency to make it out to be this thing that it's really not. Like a lot of people try to make it out to be really super difficult and, like it's the be all end all. It's not. It is simply another way of fishing. It's no different than the difference between a spinning rod and a bait caster. It's no different than a hand line and a spinning rod. It's no different. A fly rod, in my opinion, is simply another tool in your tackle box. It's another tool in your toolbox. It's another club in your golf bag. You can't do everything with a driver. Driver's good for some things. You could putt with a driver, but it wouldn't be the best thing. You could drive with your putter, but it wouldn't be the best thing. That's the way I feel about a fly rod. I think a fly rod is really good for certain things, not good for other things. There are times when I prefer to fly fish, even though I know that it's not as effective as other methods. There are times that I spin fish, even though I know that it would be a good opportunity to fly fish. It's just another tool. It's just another way to fish. If you get enjoyment out of it, awesome. If you don't, that's fine too. Nobody's pushing you one way or another here. This is just a way to get started. Now, I started my career as a fly fishing guide. I spent a summer in Yellowstone National Park, fly fish for the trout out there. Decided I wanted to do more of that. Ended up in Jackson, Wyoming the next year and started my career as a drift boat guide, taking people fly fishing. What we would have to do is people would show up. They wouldn't have any idea which end of the rod to hold, and we would have to take them from zero to being able to cast well enough to catch a fish within a couple hundred yards of the boat ramp. And you come up with kind of a method of teaching people that it's very easy. And you know what? Fly fishing is easy. It's not hard. It looks complicated. When you first pick it up and you don't know what you're doing, it seems impossible, but it's really not hard. It works the same way as a spinning rod. A fly rod is loaded with the line rather than the fly. A spinning rod or a bait caster is loaded with the weight of the lure that you're throwing, right? And then the line actually weighs very little. And so the lure, when you cast it out, you bend the rod, you unload the rod like a bow and arrow, and it flings the jig or lure or whatever you're throwing out there, and it carries the light line behind it. That's how a spinning rod or a bait caster works. Fly rod works exactly the opposite. Fly rod works by using heavier line to propel a virtually weightless fly. Okay, so the fly is carried by the line and carries it out to the target. So it's kind of the same, but exactly the opposite. You're loading the fly rod with the weight of the line, not the weight of the lure or fly. Okay, and actually, if the fly weighs very little, like almost nothing, it's easier to cast than a fly that weighs a lot, like a heavy tarpon fly or a permit fly or a bonefish fly that is designed to sink really fast. So those are the main comparisons and differences, but the method to get it out there is really not complicated either. All right, so what I want to talk about is how I kind of split fly fishing up into two different segments. So if you're thinking about getting into fly fishing, you like to fish and you're looking, you've learned how to catch these bass on lures, and now you're thinking, well, maybe I'd like a little more challenge, or maybe you've caught a whole bunch of bonefish on spin, and it seems like you've seen other people fly fish for bonefish, and maybe you want to try that. Maybe it's just a little more of a challenge for you because you don't know how to throw this rod. So there's going to be this learning curve. It's very exciting. There's lots to learn. Then you can learn how to tie your flies. There's a whole world of information out there, and fly fishing is amazing for that. It's really awesome. Um, so if you're in that position, whether you're a freshwater angler or a saltwater angler, we'll try to give you some tips that'll help you to get started, right? We'll do way more podcasts down the road of how to get better, how to make your cast better, but let's just talk today about how to get started. So let's break fly fishing up into two different segments. One would be freshwater and the other would be saltwater. Okay. Fly rods are, if you look at a fly rod, you're going to see a designation on there. You're going to see an overall length. Maybe it might be 9 feet or 8.5. Some rods, specialty rods, are much longer, some are shorter. But let's just say the standard rod is 8.5 or 9 feet long. So you're going to see a designation on the length of the rod. Then you're going to see a designation of the weight of the rod. Now, the weight corresponds to the line weight that rod throws, the line that it's been designed around, so that when 30 feet of line are outside of the rod tip and you cast properly, you're properly loading that rod and able to make a cast. So the rod designation, the line designation, is going to go from 0 to 15. Okay, 0 being the lightest, 15 being the heaviest. You might see some specialty rods that are something below that, like a point something, or maybe a 17 weight rod or 18 weight rod or something like that. But for the most part, 0 to 15. That's what we're going to talk about today. All right, so a 0 weight rod is the absolute lightest rod. It's for panfish. It's for very light, very small trout, very light tippets. It's a very specialty rod. On the other end of the spectrum, you have a 15 weight, which is a specialty rod for offshore fishing, for marlin fishing, for sailfish, for tuna, and we're going to go into the differences here. So in freshwater, I'm going to consider rod sizes 0 to, let's say, 8. 0 to 8 for freshwater fishing. Now, 0 being the lightest, it's more of a specialty rod. A 1 weight is a very special rod for a very special purpose. When you get into about a 4, 5, 6 weight, you're starting to get to what would be considered a rod that would have more purposes than just this one specialty of being a very fine dry fly rod or something like that. So a 5 weight, in my opinion, a 5 weight is the most all-around freshwater rod. With a 5 weight, you're going to be able to do all your different types of trout fishing, some better than others, but you're going to be able to do them. You're going to be able to throw small dry flies. You're going to be able to nymph all day long. You're going to be able to throw streamers. You're going to be able to fish for bass a little bit with light bass bugs. You're going to have a pretty all-around rod. It's not going to be the best for a lot of things, but you're going to be able to accomplish those things. So that's the 5 weight. The 5 weight sits right in the middle, kind of the 0 to 8 weight. An 8 weight's going to be fairly heavy for freshwater fishing. It's going to be for throwing big flies to larger fish, maybe musky fishing, maybe something like that. And there's probably some situations where you would use a 10 weight rod in freshwater, but they're going to be few and far between for the most part. A 5 weight is going to allow you to catch everything from panfish to trout and many other fish. So that's kind of the all-around rod for freshwater. Let's talk about what the all-around rod for saltwater would be. In saltwater, I'm going to say, just like we said, from 0 to 8 is going to be kind of the freshwater lineup of rods. I'm going to say there's a little crossover here. There's a little crossover between freshwater and saltwater. 6 to 15 are going to be your saltwater rods. A 6 weight in saltwater is going to be a very specialty rod. It's going to be for small redfish or something kind of smaller, not on windy days. As you move up to a 7, that's a little bit. You're starting to get a little heavier rod. It allows you to do a couple of other things. When you get to an 8 weight, that's about your standard bonefish rod. A 9 weight, you're going to be able to do all your bone fishing, some light permit fishing, and some small tarpon fishing, as well as many other things with a 9 weight. When you get to a 10 weight, this is going to be your 5 weight of saltwater. It's going to be really, really good and the go-to rod for permit fishing. But, it's going to be a little heavy for a lot of bone fishing, but you're still going to be able to do it. It's going to be a little heavy for a lot of red fishing, but you're still going to be able to do it. It's going to be a little light for some big tarpon fishing, but you're still going to be able to do it. So you see, that's the rod that has the most universal use. So that's the most versatile rod in saltwater, in my opinion, a 10 weight. So a 5 weight in freshwater, a 10 weight in saltwater. Now, as you go over a 10 weight, you get into an 11 weight. You start talking about that's more of a specialty tarpon rod, a 12 weight tarpon with a little bit of overlap with offshore. A 13 to 15, those rods are offshore rods that are typically built not with casting in mind as much as something like a 6 through a 10, but more of a rod that is designed for fighting the fish. You're going to be able to flop a big fly out there, and then when you do hook a big fish, you're going to be able to fight it with a rod that has a lot more backbone, the 13 to 15 rod. Okay, so for the most part, let's just not even think about the specialty rods, the 0 through 4, and the 6 through 9, and then the 11 through 15. For the purposes of this, let's just talk about a 5 and a 10. You got a 5 weight for freshwater is the most versatile all-around rod. You got a 10 weight for saltwater. So if you are a person that wants to get into fishing, I'd kind of be looking there as my go-to rod, my first rod that I'm going to purchase. If I'm a person that wants to learn how to fly fish and I'm mostly fishing in freshwater, I'm going to be kind of looking around that 5 weight category for my first rod. If I'm a saltwater guy, be looking at the 9 or the 10. I'm going to personally lean a little more towards the 10 for my saltwater fishing. But, if you were a guy that thought, well, mostly what I'm going to do is I'm going to fish for pompano off the beach here, and I'm going to fish for small redfish, and I'm going to fish for, Spanish mackerel when they come along the beach, then maybe you're looking more at like a 9, like a little lighter rod. The chances of you going permit fishing are probably not that good for a while. So maybe a 9 weight. So a 9 or a 10, something like that. Now, when you look at the fly fishing landscape, or you walk into a fly shop, or you go online and you look, there are a ton of rods. How do you know which one you want, right? Do you really want to drop $1,000 on a rod right now? You've never cast before. You don't know if you're even going to like this. So there's a guy in fly fishing. His name is Lefty Cray. He's left us now. He was the greatest fly fisherman of all time, and he was also the funniest fly fisherman of all time, maybe the funniest fisherman of all time. Doesn't matter if he was holding a fly rod or not. The guy was funny. And he used to be doing his demonstrations, and he would say, any rod that costs more than $100 can cast better than the guy holding it. Okay? So and that was a long time ago when there were very few rods that cost around $100. Now, there are some rods that cost $100. You can get a whole outfit to get started. Now, is this going to be the rod that you have 10 years from now and it's your go-to rod? Maybe not. But let's talk about the purposes of getting into the sport. Get something that you can afford. Some rod manufacturers have guarantees. So I've seen 25-year guarantees. I've seen lifetime guarantees where if you break this rod, they'll send you a new one or they'll fix it. That's a good thing to have on your first fly rod. Maybe a better thing to have on your first fly rod than it is on your last fly rod. Because when you're first getting started in this, you might not realize that fly rods are a little more delicate than spinning rods. And if you handle them like you handle your spinning rod, you're probably going to break them. Also, they're a little longer. So maybe you're not used to walking into a room and having it hit the ceiling fan. Well, that happens all the time. So you, you chop up your new fly rod and the ceiling fan. It's nice if you have a guarantee. Guarantee is pretty nice. So if there's a guarantee and you can afford it, awesome. If not, and you're just saying, look, I'm gonna drop a couple $100 here, and I'm gonna try this, and if I like it, I'll get deeper into it, and if I don't, then I won't get into it. Great. That's a good way to think about it. What you want to do is, let's just say you're a freshwater guy or a saltwater guy, either one, I guess. You want to go ahead and get this rod, and you want to mess around with it. And what I suggest is getting some kind of combo. Um, if you go to a fly shop, they can line you out with something, and maybe they got some good deals on a really good reel and a nice line and a nice rod, and they're going to put this whole thing together for you. Great, awesome. If you don't know what you're doing and you're looking around, um, go to Bass Pro Shops, look around at the White River Fly Shop, find a little outfit that looks good to you, get it, and start messing around with it. Um, when I started fly fishing, there were very few resources available. So basically, I had to go out in the yard and whip myself into a frenzy, trying to learn how to throw. Eventually, things started working out. And eventually, I started to learn how to cast. And doing so, I came up with my own style, and and that's how I learned how to cast. So I'm completely self taught. You can absolutely teach yourself to cast. There's there are hundreds of thousands of people that have taught themselves how to cast. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people, maybe not hundreds of thousands of people, but lots of people teach themselves to cast. You have lots of other resources available now. YouTube is packed full of videos that can teach you how to cast. There are endless amounts of videos that have been produced on how to cast. Get your hands on any of these resources, books, magazines, all kinds of stuff. That's resource number one. Resource number two is an actual fly shop. If you go to an actual fly shop, if you're lucky enough to have a fly shop in your neck of the woods, go in there and talk to the people. Tell them what you want to do, and chances are somebody in that fly shop can give you a couple of casting lessons. I'm telling you, 20 minutes with somebody that knows how to cast in an environment where you're not trying to catch a fish, but you're trying to learn how to cast. So at a park or a football field or a small pond where you're just trying to learn how to cast. You spend 20 minutes out there with somebody that can give you a little bit of instruction. Then now you can go home and mess around with it. You kind of know what you're supposed to be doing. Mess around with it for a week or two. You're going to be getting better. And then, kind of move your way into the sport. Go try to catch some panfish first, catch some different things, and your local fly shop, that's your resource, right? Your local fly shop can look like a lot of different things. It can be an actual fly shop with fly fishing professionals in there that really know a lot. It can be Bass Pro, which has the White River Fly Shop, and they have fly fishing professionals in there that can really help you out. They sell flies. They can show you different places on a map that you can go fishing. These are your best resources. The ultimate resource is your local fishing guide or the fishing guide in that area that fly fishes. This guy actually is going to go out there, book the guide for a day. Tell him that you're trying to learn how to fly fish. It's important to tell him that you're trying to learn how to fly fish so that he can pick the area that you're going so that you might have some success. You don't want him taking you to the hardest place there is. Maybe that's where the fishing is the best, but it's really hard, you know, or it's a tiny little creek that, it's really hard to cast and you really need to be an expert caster. You don't want that. You want to go to a place where you want him to kind of line you out. And it's important that he knows what the program is before you get there. Like, don't call and book somebody and have them think you're an expert fly fisherman, and then you get there and this is casting lessons, okay? Because he might have taken you to another place where you could have caught all kinds of fish. Maybe there's a stock pond where around the water that he fishes in, and you could go out there, and if you can flop it out there, you're probably going to catch a fish. You're going to learn more like that than you would the other way. But it's also important to learn how to cast in a place where you're not trying to catch a fish. So spend some time with that guide or the guy from the fly shop or Bass Pro or whoever, and get some instruction, and then go practice and practice and practice and practice. The same holds true for saltwater. If you can get with, a saltwater fishing guide, they can really, really help your casting. And one day with them, not only is going to give you a more complete understanding of what you're supposed to be doing to flop the thing out there, but also, what flies you should buy or learn how to tie, how you're supposed to work these flies, what you do if a fish actually bites one, all the way down the line. And maybe on that trip, you have a little success and then things start coming together for you. But at this point, at least you're not sitting around thinking about wanting to get into the sport. I want to learn how to fly fish this summer. Okay. If you want to learn how to fly fish this summer, first thing you need to do is get a rod and start practicing, start casting. You know what? You're not going to be good at it. Nobody is. You're definitely not going to be good at it right away. But once you get a little instruction, once you practice, once you watch a few videos, you're going to start getting better. And you're one step further. You're not just sitting around thinking about it. You're actually doing it. And if you like it, man, take it further. And if you kind of like it, then do it when the weather's right. But you can think about it just as another club in your golf bag, another tool in your toolbox. And the most important thing to do is to get started. And that starts with buying a rod or borrowing a rod. Maybe you know somebody you can borrow a rod. Acquiring a rod. Get a rod somehow and practice casting. From there, find the best person in your area and get some help from them. And if that's impossible, then just look on YouTube, look on Waypoint, look on all the different places that videos are uploaded these days, and just kind of follow instructions. Fly fishing is a really great thing to do. And I'm so glad that so many people had questions about it and wanted to get started. Now, this can be the intro episode, and we can take this as far as you want to go. There's a lot you can do with fly fishing, from just casting to tying your flies to, different techniques on setting the hook, and I mean, on and on and on and on and on. It's a lifetime sport. You're never going to learn it all. You're never going to know it all. And you're going to continue to improve all the way from now until you're not here anymore. But that's one of the things that I really like about fly fishing the most. So if you're interested in fly fishing, I give you my encouragement to follow the instructions here. Get yourself a rod, start practicing. Hit me up with questions, podcast@saltwaterexperience.com. If you liked this, please take a moment to go to iTunes and rate and review the podcast. That really makes a big difference. And I will see you out there on the water. Good luck fly fishing. I hope you get a rod by the time I talk to you again. See you.